Also, this is an interesting way to do the dragon. But it kind of works. Actually, someone is about to die. But it... Never mind. No, wait. We're still okay. Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. And this set is a bit special. First, it is a live stream highlights edition. But where normally I randomly choose jobs to add variety, in this specific set, I am actively choosing jobs and roles to optimize the pace at which we can clear Mentor Roulettes. Which is to say, in a way, this is kind of a demonstration of how I would be running Mentor Roulette if I was only doing it for the achievement alone. But there's a very good reason for that. Now, that said, for Duty 1, we went to Neverreap as Sage. Based on the way they play, I guessed the dancer in the party is completely new to the job. For the beast pool, it goes better than last time I was here as a healer, mainly because we had already cleared up most of the pack before we had to start running, as our tank still dies to surprise final sting without invuln. The second boss has an interesting mechanic where it puts down totems that you can move, and then it tries to raise them. Due to the quantity of totems as the fight progresses, it sort of requires everyone to participate to avoid getting any totems in the fight. But that is effectively the whole fight. Aside from this, a nice duty run. For Duty 2, we went to Under the Boots as Gunbreaker. Quick 20-second duty. For Duty 3, we went to Castrum Meridianum as Gunbreaker, and about half the party knew me. Hello! A Gunbreaker tip for the first boss is to remember that you can generate cartridges faster with your AoE, but the boss itself is the primary target that needs to die, so you might benefit from generating cartridges with AoE while making sure to use burst strikes on the boss in between, even if it is not optimal maximum damage output on the enemies in general. This was a solid group though, so we finished in just about 15 minutes. For Duty 4, we went to Grand Cosmos as Scholar. On the first boss, we run into some issues here and there over Broom sweeping up party members, both leading to our Viper having 3 Vuln stacks at one point, but doesn't lead to their death, and later our tank having 3 Vuln stacks. However, these 3 Vuln stacks overlap with the tank buster that the tank decided to take with 0 mitigation, just barely killing them. In retrospect, if I topped them up, they might have lived. At the same time, they didn't use any mitigation for it. On the final boss, we run into some issues due to misunderstood mechanics, so let's talk a bit about that. The dangerous mechanic in this fight is Mortal Flame, which outright kills you if it times out. The only way to survive it is to pass it off to some of the furniture in the arena. However, doing so destroys the furniture, and there is only so much of it. The furniture also is destroyed by being hit by the fiery explosions of otherworldly heat and the frontal cleaves of Fire's domain. As Mortal Flame is only used twice throughout the fight, that means you do need 8 pieces of furniture to survive. My recommendation for this is to prioritize the bigger, more central pieces first, as the couches on the edge are easier to avoid hitting by accident. Now, in this party we lose one of the drapes to the first otherworldly heat. I imagine the individual thought that was Mortal Flame. Then we lose a couch, somehow, to Fire's domain, which at this point means, with the chandeliers that drop down later, we have 5 pieces of furniture remaining. Unfortunately, 2 of those burst into flames too, so someone will die. We of course recover and finish up, but it does suck when you're the one that just can't resolve the mechanic because of earlier mistakes. By the way, did you know that Warrior can solo Grand Cosmos Synced? For Duty 5, we are an instant replacement for Labyrinth of the Ancients as Warrior, always with the Alliance raids. For the first boss, we saw one of the strangest ways to solve it, yet it somehow worked. So one of the common strategies to do this fight is to simply keep the dragon on the edge of the center platform. This means most of the raid can easily intercept and AoE any skeletons that spawn before it becomes a problem. However, as the dragon frequently spews a frontal cone breath, you should aim to have the dragon on the edge of the platform with the butt on the platform and the head away from it. Which is not what happened here. Somehow, no one as much as questioned it or even commented on it. No rescues were used to try and quote-unquote fix it, and we just did the fight anyway. Due to the dragon facing inwards, it was all very difficult to deal with the skeletons, so they generally didn't get dealt with. We still survived somehow. But yeah, if you ever needed evidence that if you just put your back into it, this dragon can almost be beaten in any way imaginable, then here you go. For the final boss, first, a quick tip. The Magitech claws will grab the closest player to them when they spawn, so if you want to avoid being grabbed, get closer than your teammates. I mainly recommend doing this because if you know this, then you also know you need to help with the claw, so avoid being grabbed so you can save your friends. Finally, a quick reminder that whether you can skip the second flare comes down to exactly when he starts casting it, which can come down to a bunch of things. Even if you have a pumper group, it might not always work if he happens to Ancient Flare very early. Now, other times you have a group like this where we somehow make it. For duty 6, we went to Praetorium as Viper, and Ilana is here. And this group seemed pretty solid, so we finished up in about 26 minutes. There isn't really that much to say about this run, as it goes about as you'd expect. For duty 7, we were a 23-minute replacement on Leviathan Extreme as Sage. And from what we could tell, it seems like the party had gotten one solid pull and wiped, as we had 5% echo. For my first pull with the team, things go reasonably well, although I don't think my co-healer realized that they were building up that debuff from healing the tail tank. It didn't really come up as a direct issue, so we never approached it. Our Black Mage seems to have a really hard time with the platform slides, and to that, a little healer tip. If you are safe from the slide and you see someone who's not going to make it, you can use Rescue to counteract it and save them. Although you can only save one person about every second slide or so. In the second half of the fight, the Scholar and the Black Mage goes down in the chaos of sudden circle AoEs and a flyby from Leviathan. Leading into the second barrier section, the Scholar and Summoner both go down to the sudden AoEs, and the Black Mage slides off the arena again. Due to a combination of maybe not quite enough attention to it and too many dead, the Wave-Tooth Sahagin gets its raid-wide fear off, which is effectively an instant party wipe. For the second attempt, we make it all the way to the second slide before any deaths, at which point both the Scholar and Black Mage goes down. That said, the one thing we changed from the first attempt is that we recognize that the fish man with the staff has higher priority than anything else, since that was what wiped us before. And for the final slide, no one dies, partly thanks to me rescuing the Black Mage. We dogpile the Sahagin and wrap up the fight very cleanly. And based on achievements, we had 5 first-timers at least. Well done, everyone. For duty 8, we went to Worqor Zormor as Sage, and the whole team was solid, so the main thing worth talking about here is the Sage Warrior teamwork. The Warrior here liked to use Bloodwetting when they dropped to about half, which took long enough that I could safely use Kerachole at the start and then have it back and ready again by the time Bloodwetting ends. This matters, since when a warrior is using their cooldowns smartly, you mostly just have to help them in the time between Bloodwettings and AoE pulls, if you want to make it easier for them. So, with Sage having a tendency to go at AoE pulls in a very structured manner, you can almost skip every other thing you'd normally do, as the warrior will cover it themselves. This also leaves you a huge amount of resources in case something goes wrong. For duty 9, we went to P7N, Pandæmonium's Anti-Plus as Gunbreaker. From a tank or healer's point of view, one detail that can easily be overlooked about this boss is that she auto-attacks both tanks. Some tanks can maintain themselves just fine through the fight, but if you're a healer in this context, I highly recommend keeping a closer eye on the off-tank, because they have a tendency to be forgotten, somehow. Now, aside from a few deaths to silly things, this run goes very well and clears only a bit slower than my average run of this fight. For duty 10, we went to impressive Triforce as Pictomancer, a secret rare guild test. Due to the sheer amount of stops and starts in this one, as a Pictomancer, do make sure to use your living muses as much as you can. Also, we determined that Cryus Longbeard, who doesn't have a beard, is actually named that way because he cries as he longs for a beard. Anyway, not surprising, we cleared this easily. For duty 11, we went to Stabbing Fronts as Pictomancer. Best advice I can give to Pictomancer here is to prioritize single targeting the healers. Remember, the ones with a cane, the names mislead. For duty 12, we went to Bird Up as Viper, and in our attempt to try and make the run fast, we end up almost getting caught in a conga line of cameo, making the duty a bit longer. But yet, we still did not see the supposed bigger demon the cameos can summon, or so I've heard. For duty 13, we went to Titan Hard as Viper. A little insight into the way I pick jobs and roles for this sort of speedrun set is that, well, I mainly pick jobs I'm very good at, and no can perform well regardless of what level duty we get. But I have determined that DPS are more likely to get shorter duties if they do get duties. So throughout the evening, I would queue for 2 minutes as a DPS, and then switch to a support if nothing happens. Now, in regards to this particular fight, there isn't much Viper can really do, but at the same time, the fact Viper has effectively a completely flatlined damage output means that Titan's stops and starts can't possibly affect you much. For duty 14, we went to Great Gubal Library as White Mage. On the first boss, our Black Mage was so slow to dodge that they eventually became fully immune to the heavy and slow effects from the Dark Floor mechanic. I guess that's technically also a strategy. On the second boss, 2 things. The first one is that when the books are slain, the closest player is tethered by the orb, so if you want to be sure it follows you, hug the book closer than everyone else. The second thing is that apparently, the tethered orbs are extremely fragile and can be broken by punting into another player or into the wind spheres, so really pay attention when you direct the orb around. On the final boss, it was pretty clear our team didn't have a super impressive damage output, as we end up having to resolve all 3 sets of ritual circles. The positive in this is, of course, that we all did. So, despite these strange mechanical mistakes throughout the duty, it still ended pretty well. For duty 15, we went to Underkeep as Black Mage. I want it to be known that as of the making of this video, I have still not seen the 7.3 dungeon in Expert Roulette or Mentor Roulette. I'm starting to believe it is actually a mirage. It never actually happened. Overall, this duty went very well, and I didn't really notice any outliers while running the duty, but here now in review, I see that our tank has a surprisingly low amount of HP for a tank. So I'm quite impressed things went as smoothly as they did. A quick reminder that Underkeep at present doesn't item level sync, so a tank is perfectly capable of having like 240,000 HP. But at the same time, item level 705 is the minimum required, and this tank has approximately the amount of HP you would have at that item level. For duty 16, we went to Bardam's Mettle as Warrior. Did you know that Warrior can solo Bardam's Mettle synced? Probably. Anyway, aside from this, the duty goes pretty well, but there is something really funny about our healer. The best way I could explain it is that it feels like they play correctly, but the wrong spells come out. They seem to attack when it is mostly safe too, but whether they use Holy or Stone seemed random. They also used Cure 1 at times where there was no reason to, and other times when it would have possibly made sense to use Cure 2. But not Cure 1. Sometimes they would set up Medica 2 when only one person needed healing. Things like that. But overall, the duty went decently well despite it. It was just really weird. For duty 17, we went to Friendly Castles as Ninja, so 1-2s all around. While we have Hide, we don't have Trick Attack, so it really comes down to just Mug. I guess one thing to consider in retrospect is holding Mug for the Toad. For duty 18, we went to Porta Decumana as Scholar. all 3 MSQ roulettes in chronological order. With them all collected, I summon Exodia! Wait, wrong franchise. And context. Anyway, during the second phase, our tank disconnects, putting us in a rather awkward position. No big deal, as I just aggressively maintain ad loquium on our Viper as we press on. The tank comes back only about 45 seconds later, and we finish up as expected. An interesting detail is that this was actually faster than the Castrum Meridianum duty. For duty 19, we went to M4N, Arcadion's Wicked Thunder, as Pictomancer. The run goes very well with very few deaths. We even skip the second wing phase. However, we finish up as the 2-minute burst starts up, which kinda means that it is possible I could have done more damage by skipping some of the final motifs, but at the same time, there was just enough time to get the most valuable part of each motif out the door, so I guess it was all worth it anyway? Is it worth it to paint Starry Sky motif just for Star Prism? Maybe? I guess? What do you think? For duty 20, we were a 17-minute replacement in Tower at Paradigm's Breach as Viper, and some of our party members also knew me. Hello! All things considered, I would say the duty went decently well. However, based on the duty time alone, I feel like the run was either slow or mediocre? Although that usually ends up meaning an average run, since this duty has a tendency to go sideways due to how infrequently it comes up. About 42 minutes, so thankfully, I guess, I joined in late. A really random tip for the final boss is that if you get targeted by one of these sideways expanding arrow AoEs, place them on the edge of the arena so they expand along the sidelines. This makes things much safer for the rest of the raid. For duty 21, we went to St. Mocianne's Arboretum as Sage, and this was a pretty solid team, so not that much to write home about. A little fun fact and reminder is that this is also the dungeon where the Sage tutorial solo duty takes place. An important thing to keep in mind as Sage in this level range is that as Keracholi does not heal at this level, putting more emphasis on Ryucholi and Ixocholi for the healing in a dungeon like this may be highly preferable, and doing so probably will make the dungeon feel easier to handle. For duty 22, we went to Toxic Plants Assemble as Gunbreaker. Big AoE spam to collect all the mobs and then focus the boss whenever possible. All the ads are entirely optional and despawn when the boss dies, unlike a certain other guild test. For duty 23, we went to M5N, Arcadion's Dancing Green as Viper, with Taldemar and Marcus. Overall, the duty goes well, but near the final third of it, things get a little dicey. Both healers and a tank goes down to a combination of Snap Twist and the Frog Tarage choosing to hit the middle of the arena. What makes that interesting is that when the Frog Tarage hits the outer sides, you can survive it. But if you stand in the centered overlap, 2 of them tends to kill anything but a tank, all on its own. Thankfully, we had a red mage that raised both healers quickly, one of them twice. However, if you're missing a tank, then the cone tank busters will target a random player as the other target. So the red mage raised the second healer just as they themselves went down as a result. Despite that, we managed to get back on our feet and finish up the fight in style thanks to this red mage. You will be remembered. For duty 24, we went to Rathalos Extreme as Sage with Taldemar. I got the impression our tank was a completely blind first-timer to this fight, as multiple mistakes kind of gave it away. Most notably, they tried extremely hard to take aggro on Rathalos at the start. We unfortunately did not make it to phase 2 in the first attempt as Garuda kills our Dragon Rider. For attempt 2, we went over some of the crucial details of the fight, and so things went a lot better. Despite the amount of times we got hit by avoidable attacks, impressively, no one died at any point in the fight on this attempt. We also got far enough down to the wire that I had 1 potion left after being targeted by the stack marker sequence 3 separate times. But we made it through at a somewhat reasonably normal pace. Well done, team! For duty 25, we went to Paglth'an as Gunbreaker. The run took, relatively speaking, a long time, and I believe it was a combination of not the strongest players in the party, that's okay, as well as misunderstanding mechanics, especially on the first boss. The crucial mechanic on this boss is that you must hand off the lightning AoEs to a lightning rod, and while our team gradually figured it out, it took so long that by the time they had finally understood it and figured it out, the fight was pretty much over. I did keep helping with explaining how it is done, of course, so I wasn't just leaving them out to dry. Aside from this, I think the duty just prolonged due to suboptimal use of cooldowns, which means a combination of them not being used efficiently, but also some cooldowns just not being used enough, but I'm sure they will improve with time. For duty 26, we went to Alexandria as a 6-minute replacement machinist, and strangely found ourselves at the start of the duty with the party. Did they wait all this time for a DPS replacement? Why? Anyway, the duty went at an alright pace once we got underway. I was noticing that it felt like our damage was a bit lower than I'd normally expect, but that can be hard to tell without looking at specifics. A notable example I could point out is that I usually don't see this donut AoE, line AoE, half-room cleave combo that comes after elimination on the final boss, unless someone dies during the fight. But in this case, we had no deaths. Anyway, the duty still went alright. And finally for duty 27, we went to, of course, perfectly, for duty number 1000. Under the Mentor Roulette. It couldn't possibly be more perfect than that. I'm actually reasonably confident, without doing a count, that this is the one duty I've gotten the most, at least since Dawntrail, in Mentor Roulette. So, of course we finished with it as duty 1000 as well. Which of course means we have finally reached 1/2 of the way to the achievement. And I hope this clarifies how, most of the time, I'm simply running Mentor Roulettes for fun and then we randomly see how many duties we get, as I would have approached it quite differently if I was in it just for the duty clears. I hope you have enjoyed coming along for this journey with me so far as we continue forward towards the full 2000. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, the first failed Mentor Roulette duty I ever had was one of the first Mentor Roulettes I ever did, long before I started streaming or making videos about it. That duty was Leviathan Extreme, and it actually initially scared me off from doing Mentor Roulettes because I was afraid it was going to be like that all the time. Fortunately, I guess that is not the case.